Mermaid Saga is an interesting and often overlooked work by Rumiko Takahashi, as it's one of her shorter series, excluding one-shots, and a lot of its themes and styles would later be used in Rumiko Takahashi's most iconic work, Inuyasha. So that begs the question, how good is Mermaid Saga? Is it worth reading? And what's it about? I'm going to answer all these questions and more in my review of Mermaid Saga by Rumiko Takahashi. Mermaid Saga was serialized in Shonen Sunday Super between 1984 and 1994 and consists of 3 volumes, and 2 years after Mermaid Saga concluded, the serialization of Inuyasha would begin. Mermaid Saga was a departure from Rumiko's previous established series like Mason and Koku and Urusei Yatsura, as it would be less focused on comedy and would focus on horror and action as well as the usual romance elements always present in the Rumiko Takahashi series. Like previous works of Takahashi, Mermaid Saga establishes the premise and characters of the story early on to then shift to an episodic storytelling method. The most important part of Mermaid Saga is the legend that someone who consumes the flesh of a mermaid will attain immortality, but runs the risk of dying or becoming a horrific monster. This legend will be the center of most of the conflict and drive of the story. Mermaid Saga begins with our protagonist, Yuta, who has been wandering around Japan in search of mermaids, not with the intention of becoming immortal, but instead in search of a cure for his immortality, as Yuta has already eaten the flesh of a mermaid. Yuta in his quest stumbles upon a hidden and hostile village that is filled with mermaids. These mermaids themselves seek to maintain their own youth and immortality by the cultivation and murder of young human women who have consumed mermaid flesh. Their current victim, Mana, is unaware of this reality and has been a prisoner of the mermaid village for many years. Ultimately, she is saved by Yuta, and the two begin their immortal journey, seeking purpose in life and a cure for Yuta's immortality. After this initial setup, the story would begin its episodic nature of Yuta and Mana traveling around Japan, running into mermaid-related trouble and conflict, while deviating to tell stories about Yuta's long past with other characters and drama. These flashback chapters are stories in their own right, fleshing out Yuta's character as well as serving a purpose and establishing a good reason to him wanting to be mortal again, as people who consume mermaid flesh, gain immortality, can still die by means of decapitation. But Yuta doesn't simply want to die, he wants his mortality back, to grow old and pass away peacefully, and experience the part of his life unattainable to him, like growing old. These flashbacks are great to storytelling and the world building of Mermaid Saga, but my main problem with the series as a whole is how underdeveloped the main present day story with Yuta and Mana is. While Yuta is very much so a main character, Mana often feels as though she falls short of this title, as she receives far less screen time compared to Yuta, and her role in the series feels a bit ambiguous. Mana, like many Rumiko Takahashi heroines, is well balanced, shifting between being strong-willed heroine and a heroine deeply dependent on the protagonist. Because of Mana's time in the hidden village, she is extremely sheltered and knows little of the outside world. This directly contrasts Yuta, who has wandered around Japan for hundreds of years. Mana often acts like a spoiled brat throughout the series and is deeply reliant on Yuta as a guardian. A romance between Yuta and Mana is left ambiguous, but Mana's loyalty and strong feelings of affection and appreciation are not, and are well supported throughout the manga. Overall, my biggest problem with Mana is the same problem I have with Mermaid Saga. The series is underdeveloped and too short. It definitely could have used a few more volumes and a more concrete development with Yuta and Mana's relationship, as well as their quest to find a cure for immortality, or at least a solid arc at the end of the series solidifying Yuta and Mana's future. By the end of Mermaid Saga, very little has happened beside the resolution of episodic conflict and the establishment of Yuta and Mana's companionship. The series even finishes on a story where both Yuta and Mana felt like background characters and were not the focus of the conflict. Of course, this is a very common occurrence in the manga, as trouble often finds Yuta and Mana, and their importance in solving the conflict often varies. Now, when people talk about Mermaid Saga, they often point out the fact that among Rumiko Takahashi's stories, it's one of her more mature works. And what they are referring to is the themes around immortality and the horror which is often present in the manga. Whether that be gory murder of the immortal characters like Yuta and Mana, or the horrific fate of someone who eats mermaid flesh and turns into a monster. The monsters, often called lost souls, are one of my favorite parts of Mermaid Saga, as they are very well done and are horrifying in multiple ways, not only because of their appearance, but the dark, unfortunate end of a person's humanity that accompanies eating the flesh of a mermaid and turning into a monster, losing all sense of self. Ultimately, Mermaid Saga is a perfectly fine series that had a lot of potential that would later be realized in other Rumiko Takahashi works. But in regard to Mermaid Saga, it leaves you wanting a lot more. It feels like a very incomplete story that often deviates from the main plot and characters, leaving the main hero and heroine too underdeveloped. The series' strong points are the horror, drama, the interesting premise with the conflict stemming from a mermaid curse, and of course the two contrasting main characters. If you're a big fan of Rumiko Takahashi, particularly something like Inuyasha, I would definitely recommend reading Mermaid Saga, albeit with the fact that it will probably leave you wanting more and feeling as though the series is missing something. I enjoyed Mermaid Saga and really do believe it could have been a much better series if it had more volumes like a traditional Rumiko Takahashi manga, but with Mermaid Saga the way it is, I would say that it's a fine read that won't blow you away. And that brings me to the end of this review of Mermaid Saga. Honestly, I enjoyed the series. What do you guys think about it? And thank you for watching the video.